Picture a Saturday night, sometime in the mid-2000s. A cramped room, dim lighting, a disco ball throwing flecks of light across the walls, and your friend, who has never hit a correct note in his life, grabs the mic and starts tearing his soul out to a Bon Jovi song. The room roars, someone's filming it on a tiny digital camera, and nobody cares that he sounds terrible, because that's the whole point. Karaoke bars were everywhere. In every mall, on every nightlife street, in every other sitcom episode from the 90s and 2000s, someone inevitably ended up with a microphone in hand. It was an entire industry, an entire culture, an entire phenomenon. Now try to remember the last time you were at a karaoke bar. Not at home with an app on your phone, not at a corporate party in a rented room. A real, classic karaoke bar, the kind people go to specifically for that. Hard to remember, right? So what happened to the karaoke boom? Did it die? Did it just quietly vanish during the pandemic and never come back? Or maybe it never actually went anywhere. It just changed shape so much that we stopped recognizing it. Today we're going to figure out where this phenomenon came from, why it exploded across the whole world, what exactly knocked it down, and what's happening with it right now. In 2026, to understand what disappeared, you first have to understand what appeared in the first place. The story of karaoke begins in Japan, in the city of Kobe, in the early 1970s. A musician named Daisuke Inoue worked in bars as an accompanist, meaning customers would come in, request a song, and he'd play it live while they sang. One day, a regular customer asked Inoue to record backing tracks on tape so he could take them on a business trip and sing without a live musician. Inoue built a simple machine, a tape player with backing tracks, a microphone, and a coin slot. He called it the 8-juke and started renting the machines out to bars. The word karaoke is a contraction of the Japanese kara, empty, and a shortened form of the English orchestra, literally, empty orchestra. And here's one of the most astonishing facts in this entire story. Inoue never patented his invention. He didn't even try. By his own account, he simply didn't think it would become anything big. That decision cost him, by various estimates, hundreds of millions, maybe billions, of dollars in potential profit. But at the same time, the lack of a patent is exactly what let the idea spread freely. Other companies started building their own versions, improving on them, and by the end of the 70s, karaoke machines were standing in bars all over Japan. In the 80s came the next key step, laserdiscs with video and lyrics scrolling across the screen. That's when the image of karaoke we all recognize today was born. Scrolling text, syllables lighting up in a color in time with the rhythm, and a background video of stock footage, a sunset or a beach, that had absolutely nothing to do with the song. Japan also produced a format that would later become crucial to the phenomenon's worldwide spread: private karaoke rooms. Instead of singing in front of strangers in an open bar, groups of friends or coworkers would rent a private room for an hour or two, order drinks and food, and sing just for themselves. That removed the main barrier, the fear of embarrassing yourself in front of strangers, and made karaoke far more accessible to shy people. By the late 80s and early 90s, karaoke started spreading beyond Japan, first to neighboring countries in East and Southeast Asia, where it took root so deeply that South Korea, for instance, coined its own term for it, noribang. And karaoke venues became as ordinary a part of the urban landscape as cafes or hair salons. Karaoke arrived in the United States mostly through waves of Japanese immigrants and businesspeople on the West Coast. And then, in the 90s, bars across the country picked it up as a way to draw crowds on ordinary weeknights. For bar owners, the appeal was simple. No need to pay a whole band, just one machine, a host, and a disc collection, and the crowd brings itself in, wanting to see their friends sing. This is where an archetype was born that would forever stay tied to karaoke in Western culture. The karaoke jockey, or KJ, the person who runs the night, encourages the shy, manages the sign-up queue, and creates an atmosphere where even terrible singing feels like part of the entertainment rather than something to be ashamed of. The 90s and 2000s became a true golden age. Karaoke showed up everywhere. In movies like Lost in Translation, where the karaoke scene became one of its most memorable moments. In countless sitcom episodes, in music videos, talent shows built around amateurs singing appeared. And while American Idol isn't technically a karaoke show in the strict sense, the entire culture of mass amateur vocal performance it exploited grew out of the same soil karaoke had already plowed. During this same period, technology took a huge leap forward. Home karaoke systems for kids' rooms appeared, along with CD plus G discs with lyrics embedded in the graphics track, and then the first software systems that let bars maintain digital song libraries with thousands of tracks instead of physical discs. Karaoke stopped being exotic and became a standard option for a night out. Movies, bowling, a bar, karaoke. By rough estimates from industry analysts of that period, the karaoke equipment and venue market in Japan alone was worth billions of dollars a year, and globally the figure was far higher once you counted all the adjacent sectors. From microphone manufacturing to song licensing, by the mid to late 2000s, karaoke had reached its cultural peak in most Western countries. It was no longer a strange Asian pastime. It was a full-fledged part of nightlife, wedding receptions, corporate parties, birthdays. Karaoke bar chains and franchises emerged, building entire business models around Japanese and Korean-style private rooms, now popping up across Europe and America too. It turned out to be the perfect format for a birthday, a bachelorette party, or a corporate event. A group of people, a private room, no strangers listening in and judging. Karaoke apps for phones started appearing even before smartphones became truly powerful, and early versions of services like Smule let people sing duets with strangers around the world right through the app. Arguably the first hint that karaoke's future would live on a screen rather than in a bar. At the same time, karaoke became a favorite tool for marketers and filmmakers. A karaoke scene is an almost guaranteed emotional beat in a film or TV show. Characters get drunk, drop their masks of composure, and reveal their true selves through clumsy, sincere singing. This trope got used so often it became an instantly recognizable cinematic device. It seemed like this would go on forever. The industry kept growing, new formats kept appearing, from themed rock music karaoke nights to specialty bars built entirely around anime or musicals. And then something happened that nobody could have predicted. The COVID-19 pandemic shut down venues around the world where people gathered indoors, breathed on each other, and, especially dangerous from an epidemiological standpoint, sang loudly. Karaoke bars turned out to be one of the riskiest leisure formats imaginable in terms of respiratory disease transmission. An enclosed space, often poor ventilation in older venues, loud singing, which studies from that period showed sprays droplets far more effectively than ordinary conversation. And on top of that, a shared microphone passed from hand to hand and mouth to mouth. In many countries, karaoke venues were among the first businesses forced to close and among the last allowed to reopen. In South Korea and Japan, where the noraebang and karaoke industry was a massive part of the entertainment economy, losses ran into the billions. Thousands of venues worldwide, from small family-run bars to large chains, simply didn't survive months or even years of forced closure. But it's important to be honest here. The pandemic wasn't the only cause of the decline. It acted as an accelerant and a catalyst for processes that were already underway. First, younger generations' leisure habits had already shifted. People who grew up with a smartphone in hand increasingly looked for entertainment that didn't require leaving the house, and increasingly favored things they could get without getting off the couch. Streaming platforms, video games, and social media were already eating into the same free evening that might once have ended at a karaoke bar. Second, the entertainment industry itself became fiercely competitive for that same leisure budget. Escape rooms, next-generation bowling clubs, arcade bars, and dozens of Instagrammable venues built specifically for photos. Karaoke had to compete not just with bars and clubs, but with dozens of new formats that didn't even exist 10 years earlier. Third, and this might be the most interesting point, a deeper cultural shift happened in how people relate to public singing at all. TikTok and other short video formats created a new arena for amateur singing. But unlike a bar with a microphone, this arena could be rehearsed, redone, trimmed of bad takes, and shown to the world only in its best version. Live, unpredictable, often ridiculous bar karaoke suddenly started to feel risky compared to a controlled, edited performance on social media. Add to that the general rise in commercial rent in big cities after the pandemic, along with rising utility costs and music licensing fees, and it becomes clear why so many classic karaoke bars simply closed and never reopened. Here's the moment we started this whole conversation for. The short answer: no, it didn't die. But it definitely stopped being the massive, ubiquitous phenomenon it was 20 years ago. And at the same time, it transformed into something unexpectedly resilient in a new form. Let's start with the cold numbers, to the extent they're available. In South Korea, the birthplace of noraebang culture, the industry noticeably shrank compared to pre-pandemic years. By estimates from regional industry associations, thousands of venues closed during the pandemic and immediately after, and a share of the survivors significantly changed how they operate. In the US and Europe, a large portion of classic open-stage bars also didn't survive the shutdown. But at the same time, something paradoxical happened. Private karaoke rooms, that same format invented back in Japan, showed far better resilience than open bars. And that makes sense. This exact format matched people's new expectations around safety, privacy, and control over their environment perfectly. When you're singing only with your friends in a private room rather than among dozens of strangers, the risks are completely different, both psychologically and literally. So what actually is karaoke today, in 2026? First, it's now mostly a private experience rather than a public one. The private room format for a group of friends has effectively become the standard wherever the industry survived at all. People pay for an hour or two in an enclosed space, bring their own crowd, and don't depend on the mood or taste of strangers in the room. Second, karaoke has become a much more domestic activity. The pandemic pushed consumer electronics manufacturers and app developers to seriously invest in home solutions. Wireless microphones with built-in speakers and lights that connect to your phone via Bluetooth became one of the most popular gift categories of the past few years. No need to go anywhere anymore. Just buy a mic for a few $dozen. Open an app with a song database on your TV, and throw a karaoke night right in the living room. Third, and this might be the most fascinating transformation, karaoke has moved into a digital, social, and even competitive format. Singing apps with millions of users let people record performances, add effects, duet with other people from the opposite side of the world, and share the result on social media. On streaming platforms like Twitch, entire categories are now dedicated to karaoke streams, where chat picks songs for the performer in real time. On TikTok, karaoke cover song trends regularly go viral, racking up millions of views. In other words, the core of the phenomenon, amateur, often imperfect, but sincere public singing, never actually went anywhere. The audience just moved from a cramped bar into the comments under a video, and the stage moved from a raised platform into a living room or a phone screen. Another interesting angle. Karaoke found a new niche in corporate and event businesses. Team-building events, weddings, birthdays, and private parties still actively book mobile karaoke services. Companies that show up with equipment right at the venue. This segment, unlike classic bars, is doing fairly well because it was always built around private, controlled groups rather than random walk-in customers. And finally, back in Asia, where it all began, the industry also adapted rather than disappeared. Noribang chains and similar venues in Japan are actively investing in technology, interactive screens, AI-based vocal scoring systems that grade singing accuracy, and social features for comparing scores with friends. In other words, where it all started, the industry simply reinvented itself for the tastes of a generation that grew up with gadgets in hand. Stepping back, this whole story says less about karaoke itself than about how mass entertainment changes in the digital age. Karaoke was never really about singing well. It was always about a permitted moment to be goofy, imperfect, and sincere in front of other people, without consequences, without judgment, just for the sake of the moment itself. That need in people hasn't gone anywhere. What changed is only where people allow themselves that moment. It used to be a bar full of strangers and a mic on a cord. Now it's more often a private room with friends, a living room with a wireless mic, or a phone with an app that lets you redo a bad take as many times as you need. The karaoke boom in its classic sense, that image of a packed bar with a disco ball and a line of people waiting for their turn at the mic, really has mostly stayed behind in the 90s and 2000s. But the phenomenon itself didn't die. It dissolved into dozens of smaller formats that, together, probably reach even more people than ever before. We just no longer see them as one big, visible wave. Before we wrap up, let's zoom in on a few specific places because the story looks pretty different depending on where you stand. Take the Philippines, for example. Karaoke there isn't really a night-out activity in the way it was in the US or UK. It's practically a household appliance. Filipino homes have long treated karaoke machines the way other countries treat a television set. Something ordinary, always plugged in, used at family gatherings, birthdays, even random Tuesday evenings. Because the format was already domestic and family-based rather than bar-based, the pandemic barely touched it. If anything, the shift toward home entertainment during lockdowns only reinforced a habit that was already deeply embedded there. This is worth remembering, because it shows that karaoke declined isn't a universal truth. It's mostly a story about the bar and nightlife version of karaoke specifically. Now compare that to the United Kingdom, where karaoke had always leaned heavily on the pub culture version. Open mic nights in the corner of a local pub, run by a KJ with a laptop and a couple of speakers. This format got hit especially hard, because pubs themselves were already struggling from rising costs and changing drinking habits among younger generations, and karaoke nights were often the first extra to get cut from a struggling venue's schedule. Industry surveys from British pub trade associations in the years following the pandemic pointed to a steady decline in the number of venues hosting regular karaoke nights, framing it as part of a broader squeeze on live entertainment nights in pubs generally, not something unique to karaoke itself. Then there's China, where the story takes yet another turn. Large-scale KTV chains, massive multi-floor buildings packed with private karaoke rooms, sometimes combined with restaurants, bars, and even hotel-like amenities, had grown into a huge, highly capitalized industry before the pandemic. Several of the biggest chains faced serious financial trouble during the shutdown years, with some well-known brands filing for restructuring or closing large numbers of locations. But at the same time, smaller format karaoke boxes, mini KTV pods that fit one or two people, often found in shopping malls, requiring no reservation and costing just a few coins for a short session, exploded in popularity precisely during this period. People wanted the karaoke experience, just without a full group, without a long visit, and without the financial overhead of a giant multi-story building. It's a very literal illustration of the broader trend. The format shrank, individualized, and became more casual, rather than disappearing. And then there's the genuinely strange, unexpected survivor. Karaoke on cruise ships and in retirement communities. These niche settings never really depended on younger crowds or trendy nightlife, and they kept running largely unaffected by the broader cultural shift away from bar culture. Cruise ship karaoke nights, in particular, remain a reliably packed event, probably because a captive audience with limited entertainment options and a built-in sense of vacation freedom turns out to be the perfect environment for the sing badly, no consequences mindset karaoke was always built on. What all of this tells us is that there was never one single karaoke industry with one single fate. There were dozens of regional versions, each shaped by different habits, different economics, and different cultural relationships with public singing. And the pandemic and streaming era shifts affected each of them differently. Some versions genuinely collapsed, others adapted, and a few barely noticed anything had changed at all. So if we look forward instead of backward, what's likely coming next for karaoke? A few trends already visible today give some hints. AI vocal tools are becoming a bigger part of the karaoke experience, not just scoring how in tune someone is, but actively adjusting pitch in real time, generating custom backing tracks for songs that never had an official karaoke version, and even letting people hear themselves sing in a different voice or style for fun. Whether that's a gimmick or a genuine shift in how people interact with the format remains to be seen. But several major karaoke equipment makers in Japan and South Korea have already rolled out AI-assisted scoring and pitch correction features as standard. Virtual and augmented reality karaoke experiences have also started popping up, mostly in dedicated entertainment venues and as apps for VR headsets, letting people perform on a virtual stage in front of a virtual crowd, sidestepping the actual social risk entirely while still delivering some of the performance thrill. It's a small niche right now, but it lines up neatly with the broader pattern we've already seen. People still want the feeling karaoke provides. They just keep finding new ways to get it with less exposure and less risk. There's also a slower, steadier trend worth watching: nostalgia. As the generation that grew up with karaoke bars in their cultural prime gets older, there's a reasonable chance we'll see a wave of retro night karaoke bars marketed explicitly on that nostalgia. Much the way arcade bars built entire business models around bringing back cabinet games for adults who grew up with them. A karaoke bar that leans into the disco ball, laserdisc era aesthetic on purpose rather than by default, could become its own kind of destination experience rather than a routine Friday night option. Whatever shape it takes next, one thing seems fairly safe to predict. Karaoke isn't going to vanish completely because the underlying need it satisfies, a low-stakes, judgment-free outlet for performance and shared silliness, doesn't really go out of style. It just keeps finding new containers to live in. The next time your friend turns on a wireless mic at home, opens an app on their phone, and starts belting out something terrible at full volume, know that you're not watching karaoke die. You're watching its quieter, but very much alive, sequel. If you enjoyed this video, hit like, share it with the friend who always steals the mic first, and let me know in the comments. When was the last time you were at a real karaoke night? See you in the next one.